Eric Dawson barely took 3 steps into the medical bay before the alarm started blaring. The sharp, shrill wailing echoed across the spotless white walls, accompanied by flashing crimson lights that illuminated every corner of the room. A dozen alien healers, each bearing various shades of scales, fur, or translucent exoskeletons, froze mid-motion and stared at him with what he could only assume was a blend of horror and intrigue. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand, a gesture that seemed to trigger immediate pandemonium. The chief healer, a tall, emerald-skinned alien named Zoltran, rushed forward, his eye stalks twitching as though they might fall off. "Human, Eric, you are leaking fluids," Zoltran said, his voice a strange mixture of urgency and disbelief. "Yeah," Eric sniffled loudly. "It's called a runny nose. It's nothing serious." "No big deal?" Zoltran repeated, gesturing wildly with one of his forearms. "Your body is expelling unidentified substances. This is a clear biohazard. Quarantine protocols must be initiated immediately." Eric groaned, holding up his hands. "Look, it's just a cold. I promise. Humans get these all the time. Annoying, sure, but not dangerous." The healers collectively recoiled, their expressions, if you could call them that, ranging from incredulous to downright horrified. A short lavender-colored alien named Felon clutched a scanner in her limbs, frantically waving it in his direction. "The human's respiratory output is filled with microscopic particles," she announced, her voice rising. "They're everywhere." Eric rolled his eyes. "You mean germs?" "Yeah, that's how colds work. Relax, I'm not contagious to aliens." "We cannot take that chance," Zoltran snapped. "Seal the chamber." Before Eric could protest, a shimmering energy field descended from the ceiling, forming a translucent barrier between him and the rest of the medical bay. The airlock doors hissed shut, and sanitation drones activated, spraying disinfectant everywhere in sight. "Seriously?" Eric muttered, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You're acting like I have some kind of space plague or something." "To us," Zoltran replied, "this condition might as well be. We have never encountered anything like it. Your symptoms are concerning: fluids emanating from your facial orifices, irregular bursts of air from your lungs. It seems your body is failing catastrophically." "It's called sneezing," Eric said, exasperated. "And yeah, it feels pretty lousy, but it's normal. I'll be fine in a few days." The healers huddled together, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of chirps, clicks, and low-frequency hums. Eric could see Zoltran consulting a data tablet while Felon continued scanning him from every angle. Finally, Zoltran turned back to Eric. "Human Eric, we must conduct a complete biological analysis to understand the extent of your condition. Please remain still while we gather data." "Not like I have a choice," Eric muttered, gesturing to the containment field. The healers went to work, bombarding him with scanners, probes, and even a floating orb emitting soft blue light as it hovered around his head. Eric sat on the edge of a cot, trying to ignore the tickle in his throat that was rapidly turning into another cough. Zoltran frowned as his tablet displayed the latest results. Elevated body temperature, inflamed respiratory pathways, and overproduction of mucus. "This is highly irregular." "It's not irregular for humans," Eric said, his voice hoarse. "We call it a fever, a sore throat, and a runny nose, classic cold symptoms." "But why would your body react this way?" Felon asked, her eye stalks wide with curiosity. "What evolutionary purpose does this serve?" "It's how our immune system fights off viruses," Eric explained, realizing he might as well give them a crash course in human biology. "The fever makes it harder for the virus to reproduce. The mucus traps it, and the coughing and sneezing expel it. It's messy, but it works." The healers exchanged skeptical glances. "This sounds inefficient," Zoltran said. Eric shrugged. "Welcome to humanity. We're not exactly the pinnacle of biological design, but we manage." Zoltran turned to Felon. "Prepare a quarantine report for the station council. This situation must be escalated until we fully understand the pathogen. All species aboard the station are at risk." Eric groaned, slumping back against the cot. "I told you it's not contagious to aliens. Our colds are species-specific. Your immune systems won't even recognize it." "We cannot rely on assumptions," Zoltran said firmly. "Your species' physiology is anomalous and unpredictable. Until we have definitive proof, you will remain in isolation." "Great," Eric muttered. "Quarantine because of the sniffles. Just my luck." As the healers continued their frantic efforts, Eric resigned himself to his fate. He wasn't thrilled about being treated like a walking biohazard, but he couldn't exactly blame them. From their perspective, his cold must have seemed like an apocalyptic event. Still, he couldn't help but wonder how long it would take to convince them to relax. After all, it was just a cold. Eric's patience wore thin as the hours dragged on. The healers scurried about, scrutinizing every sneeze, cough, and sniffle as if the fate of the galaxy depended on it. They analyzed samples of his mucus with a level of intensity that made him regret ever blowing his nose. At least he wasn't stuck inside the energy bubble anymore, though the medbay's sterile white walls were beginning to feel like a prison in their own right. Zoltran returned to his side, holding a glowing data tablet. "We have determined that your condition is caused by a rhinovirus, a pathogen unique to your species. Preliminary analysis indicates it is indeed non-transmissible to other life forms aboard the station." Eric threw his hands up in the air. "Finally, some good news. Does that mean I can go?" "No," Zoltran said flatly. "While the immediate threat of interspecies transmission appears minimal, the biological mechanisms of this virus remain perplexing. Your immune response is unlike anything we've encountered." "Of course it is," Eric muttered. "Humans are masters of overreacting to harmless stuff. That's why half of us are allergic to peanuts." Zoltran ignored the comment, his focus still on the tablet. "Your body's reaction appears self-destructive: fever, inflammation, fluid production. These symptoms would severely impair other species." "Yeah, but for us, it's just part of the process," Eric said. "It's uncomfortable, sure, but it means my immune system is working. Give me a couple of days, and I'll be back to normal." Zoltran seemed unconvinced. "This level of physical distress cannot be sustainable." "Practice," Eric said with a wry smile. "Humans have been dealing with colds for thousands of years. It's like an annoying roommate. You don't like it, but you learn to live with it." The healers exchanged uneasy glances, their eye stalks and antennae twitching in silent communication. Finally, Felon approached, holding a syringe-like device filled with a shimmering green liquid. "We have synthesized an antiviral compound based on your immune response," she said. "It should neutralize the virus and alleviate your symptoms." Eric eyed the syringe warily. What's in it?" "A combination of nanomedical agents and biopharmaceuticals derived from local flora," Felon said, as if that explained everything. "Right," Eric said, holding up his hands. "Not to be ungrateful, but I'll pass. I don't want to risk turning into a glowing green alien-human hybrid." Felon looked genuinely offended, her eye stalks drooping. "Our medical technology is highly advanced. There is no risk of mutation." "Even so," Eric said, leaning back, "humans usually just wait out a cold, fluids, rest, maybe some over-the-counter meds. No need to go full mad scientist." Zoltran frowned, his eye stalks narrowing. "Your refusal to accept treatment is illogical. You remain in a compromised state, and your symptoms continue to escalate." "It's all part of the process," Eric insisted. "Trust me, I've done this before." The healers clearly didn't like that answer, but they reluctantly backed off. Eric spent the next several hours trying to ignore their constant monitoring. Every time he sneezed or coughed, they jumped into action, recording data or running scans. It was like being trapped in a medical reality show where he was the unwilling star. By the second day, Eric's symptoms began to improve. His fever subsided, and his congestion started to clear. He felt well enough to pester the nearest sanitation drone, teaching it to play tic-tac-toe on his tablet. The healers, however, seemed more on edge than ever. Zoltran approached him with a grim expression. "Human Eric, while your recovery is progressing as you predicted, we have identified a troubling development." "Of course you have," Eric said, rolling his eyes. "What now?" "The virus appears to be mutating," Zoltran said. Eric froze. "Mutating? Are you serious?" "Yes," Zoltran replied. "The viral particles we extracted from your mucus samples have exhibited minor genetic variations. This behavior is consistent with other rapidly evolving pathogens." Eric sighed, rubbing his temples. "Look, I'm no expert, but that's normal for colds. Viruses mutate all the time. It's why we can't cure them. They keep changing just enough to slip past our defenses." Zoltran looked aghast. "And your species tolerates this?" "We don't have a choice," Eric said. "Besides, the mutations are usually small. They don't turn into super viruses overnight." Felon chimed in. Zoltran, the mutations we observed are limited to structural proteins. They do not appear to increase pathogenicity. Zoltran nodded slowly, though his concern remained evident. Even so, we must continue our research. The implications of this virus are far-reaching. Eric slumped against the wall, exasperated. You guys are making a mountain out of a molehill. It's just a cold. That remains to be seen, Zoltran said. The healers redoubled their efforts, running more tests and simulations than Eric thought possible. He tried to stay out of their way, but it was hard to ignore the growing tension in the medbay. Every new discovery seemed to heighten their sense of urgency. By the third day, the situation took an unexpected turn. A junior healer burst into the room, waving a data tablet. Zoltran, we've detected traces of the rhinovirus in the air circulation system. Eric's eyes widened. Hold up, I thought you said it wasn't contagious to aliens. It is not, Zoltran said, his tone grim. However, its presence in the station's atmosphere could provoke panic among the other residents. We must contain this immediately. The healers sprang into action, deploying sanitation drones and sealing off sections of the station. Eric could only watch in disbelief as they treated his harmless cold like it was a full-scale biohazard. This is insane, he muttered, shaking his head. You're acting like I unleashed a zombie virus. You underestimate the gravity of the situation, Zoltran said. If the station's inhabitants believe they are at risk, it could destabilize our entire ecosystem. Eric sighed, burying his face in his hands. You know what? I give up. Do whatever you need to do. Just let me know when it's over. As the healers worked tirelessly to contain the imaginary crisis, Eric found himself reflecting on the absurdity of it all. He had come to the station as part of a cultural exchange program, hoping to share a little human ingenuity with the galaxy. Instead, he had become the poster child for interstellar hypochondria. Still, he couldn't entirely blame the healers. To them, his cold must have seemed like an alien invasion in microbial form. All he could do now was wait for the storm to pass, and maybe, just maybe, teach them a thing or two about human resilience along the way. By the time the station's atmosphere system was fully scrubbed of any trace of Eric's cold virus, he had officially given up trying to explain human biology. The healers' hyper-precautionary measures had escalated to absurd levels. Entire wings of the station were being sterilized, sanitation drones patrolled relentlessly, and every being aboard was forced to wear respiratory shields, despite the virus being harmless to non-humans. Eric watched from his corner of the medbay as Zoltran addressed his team. The emerald alien paced with barely concealed anxiety. We have eliminated detectable particles from the air circulation, Zoltran said, his voice clipped. But the psychological impact of this incident cannot be understated. There are reports of station residents refusing to leave their quarters. Eric couldn't help but snort. Oh, come on. You're telling me they're hiding because of me? Zoltran's eye stalks swiveled toward Eric. Your condition has instilled fear of an unprecedented biological threat. Many species aboard this station have never encountered illness in any form. To them, the idea of a cold is terrifying. Eric groaned, leaning back against the wall. This is unbelievable. You'd think I unleashed the Black Death or something. It's a cold. Everyone will be fine. Zoltran ignored him, turning to Felon. Initiate a station-wide broadcast. We must reassure the inhabitants and provide clear instructions to prevent further panic. Eric perked up. Oh, let me do it. I'll explain everything in human terms. People love relatable content. Zoltran hesitated. While your insight into this matter is valuable, your tendency toward irreverence could exacerbate the situation. Trust me, Eric said, sitting up. I can clear this up in 5 minutes. People just need to hear it from the source. Besides, I'm the one with the cold. Who better to explain what it actually is? The healers exchanged uncertain glances, but Felon finally nodded. It might be effective. His informal tone could resonate with the station's inhabitants. Fine, Zoltran said reluctantly. You will address the station, but I will monitor and intervene if necessary. Eric grinned. Deal. Let's get this show on the road. Within minutes, Eric found himself standing in front of a holographic camera. The medbay transformed into an impromptu broadcast studio, a bright spotlight shining on him as Zoltran adjusted the equipment, his movements fidgety with unease. You're live in 3, 2, 1, Felon said, gesturing for Eric to begin. Eric cleared his throat and offered a sheepish wave to the camera. Hey, everyone. Eric Dawson here, your friendly neighborhood human, and I've got some news that'll blow your mind. Are you ready? Okay, here it is. I have a cold. Yep, that's it. Just a cold. The translator system worked overtime, broadcasting his words in dozens of alien languages. Eric could almost hear the collective confusion echoing across the station. I get it, Eric continued. You might think this sounds like some terrifying alien plague, but to humans, it's totally normal. Happens all the time. Our noses get stuffy, our throats get scratchy, we sneeze a lot. It's annoying, sure, but it's not dangerous. Zoltran gestured for him to stay on point, but Eric waved him off. Here's the thing, Eric said, leaning toward the camera. Human bodies are like scrappy survival machines. We get sick, but we bounce back. This cold is just my immune system kicking a virus to the curb. It doesn't spread to other species, and it's not going to destroy the station. So everyone can relax, take a deep breath, unless you're one of the folks wearing a respiratory shield, and stop worrying. The camera feed flickered slightly as Zoltran chimed in. We are taking every precaution to ensure the safety of the station. Human Eric's condition is under control, and there is no evidence to suggest interspecies transmission. Exactly, Eric said, flashing a grin. This whole thing is under control. If anything, I'm the one who should be panicking. Do you have any idea how stressful it is to have a team of alien healers analyzing your snot every 5 minutes? A faint ripple of laughter could be heard from the background monitoring station. Eric leaned back, crossing his arms. So here's my advice, he said. Stay calm, trust the healers, and if you're feeling really brave, come say hi. I promise I'm not contagious, and if anyone wants to bring me some soup, I wouldn't say no. The broadcast ended with a soft beep, and Zoltran immediately turned to Eric. Your flippancy undermined the gravity of the situation. Flippancy is my charm, Eric said, stretching his arms. Trust me, people needed to hear something casual. If you guys had done this, it would have sounded like a doomsday announcement. Perhaps, Zoltran admitted grudgingly. Early reports indicate a slight decrease in panic levels. However, we are not yet out of danger. The psychological impact may linger. Eric smirked. You're welcome. The next few days passed in relative calm, though the healers remained vigilant. Eric's condition improved steadily, and the virus proved as harmless to the station's inhabitants as he had insisted. The council lifted the quarantine measures, and life aboard Zeltrak 6 began to return to normal, or as normal as it could be after the Great Cold incident. One evening, as Eric sat in the station's communal lounge sipping a lukewarm cup of alien tea, Felon approached him with an awkward shuffle. Human Eric, she said, her tone unusually hesitant. On behalf of the medical team, I would like to apologize for our overzealous response. Eric waved it off. Don't worry about it. You guys were just doing your job. Besides, it's not every day you get to study a human cold up close. Indeed, Felon said, her eye stalks twitching slightly. Your species' resilience is remarkable, albeit perplexing. Yeah, we're a weird bunch, Eric said with a grin. But hey, at least you got a crash course in human biology. Maybe next time you won't hit the panic button over a sneeze. Perhaps, Felon said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. As she walked away, Eric leaned back and chuckled to himself. The whole ordeal had been exhausting, but it was hard to stay mad at the aliens. After all, they had just experienced their first taste of human fragility, and in true human fashion, he'd somehow managed to turn it into a learning experience. The day after quarantine officially ended, Eric woke up feeling like himself again. His head was clear, his nose was no longer a faucet, and his energy levels had returned to something approaching normal. If it weren't for the mountain of tissues still piled in the corner of his quarters, a grim reminder of his ordeal, he might have been able to forget the whole thing entirely. That hope was dashed the moment he stepped into the station's main promenade. Everywhere he turned, aliens of all shapes and sizes stared at him with an odd mix of curiosity and apprehension. Some whispered in hushed tones as he passed, while others gave him a wide berth, their eye stalks swiveling away as if avoiding direct contact would somehow keep them safe. Oh, for the love of... Eric muttered, running a hand through his hair. He wasn't sure whether to laugh or scream. The entire station was acting like he'd barely survived a brush with death, rather than a run-of-the-mill cold. He stopped at a vendor to grab a drink of fizzy purple concoction that tasted vaguely like grape soda and tried to ignore the way the merchant gingerly handed him the cup with an extended grabber tool. As he sipped his drink, a familiar lavender figure approached. Felon looked as professional as ever, though her eye stalks darted nervously toward the other station residents as if she were aware of their scrutiny. "Human Eric," she began, folding her appendages in a gesture he'd come to recognize as formal, yet conciliatory. "May I speak with you?" "Sure," Eric said, gesturing to the seat across from him. "What's up?" Felon hesitated before sitting down, her posture stiff. "It's a matter of station policy that requires your input." Eric raised an eyebrow. "My input? You sure about that?" "Quite," Felon said, nodding. "The council has requested guidance on how to handle potential future incidents involving human illnesses. Your recent experience has highlighted significant gaps in our preparedness for interspecies medical challenges." Eric couldn't suppress a laugh. "So let me get this straight. I caught a cold and now I'm your official alien disease consultant?" Felon's eye stalks twitched, her version of a shrug. "Your insights have proven invaluable. Your ability to endure prolonged symptoms with minimal impairment is unusual. If other humans visit the station, similar occurrences may arise." Eric leaned back, smirking. "Well, I'm glad to know my suffering wasn't for nothing. So, what do you want me to do? Write up a manual on how to deal with the common cold?" Felon tilted her head. "That would be most helpful." "Wait, you're serious?" Eric asked, nearly choking on his drink. "Entirely," Felon said. "Our understanding of human biology remains limited, and your perspective could prevent unnecessary disruptions in the future. Additionally, the Council believes such a document would reassure the station's inhabitants." Eric sighed, setting down his cup. "Fine, I'll do it. But you owe me a lifetime supply of those alien crackers I like. The ones that taste like cheesy garlic bread." "Consider it arranged," Felon said, her tone surprisingly earnest. Eric spent the next few days compiling what he jokingly called the Human Survival Guide. How to handle us without losing your minds. It was part medical reference, part humor, and entirely Eric. He included detailed explanations of human immune responses, the nature of the common cold, and a few handy tips for how to tell whether a human was actually in danger or just being melodramatic. Zoltran reviewed the draft with his usual meticulousness, occasionally pausing to ask clarifying questions. "This section on chicken soup, this is a therapeutic compound or a cultural remedy?" "Both," Eric said. "Humans swear by it when we're sick. It doesn't actually cure anything, but it makes us feel better. So it's basically magic." Zoltran didn't look convinced but made no further comment. When the document was finally approved and distributed, Eric assumed that would be the end of it. But word of the Human Survival Guide spread faster than he expected. Soon, it wasn't just the station's healers referencing it. Alien vendors, engineers, and even station security officers began citing its contents. One day, Eric was approached by a towering reptilian alien who had clearly been avoiding him during the entire ordeal. The creature held out a datapad, its claws clicking nervously against the edges. "Human Eric," it rumbled, "your guide. It is most informative." "Thanks," Eric said, eyeing the alien curiously. "Did you need help with something?" "Yes," the alien said, glancing around as if worried someone might overhear. "I have observed mild discomfort in my respiratory pathways. Could it be a cold?" Eric blinked, then laughed. "Not unless you're human, buddy. Trust me, you're fine." The reptilian nodded, visibly relieved, and slithered away. Eric shook his head, muttering under his breath. "I'm going to be the galaxy's cold doctor at this rate." As time passed, the station gradually returned to normal. The Great Cold Incident became a popular anecdote, with Eric as its reluctant protagonist. He couldn't walk through the promenade without someone referencing the ordeal. Whether to ask a question, share a joke, or offer him a bowl of soup in solidarity. One evening, as Eric sat in the communal lounge watching an alien attempt to juggle 3 glowing spheres, Zoltran approached with an uncharacteristic air of levity. "Human Eric," he said, taking a seat beside him, "your contribution to the station's medical protocols has been significant. The council has expressed their gratitude." Eric smirked. "Glad I could help. But let's be real, you guys overreacted big time." "Perhaps," Zoltran admitted. "However, your species' resilience and adaptability are undeniable. We have much to learn from you." Flattery will get you nowhere, Eric said, grinning. But I'll take it. The two sat in companionable silence. Eric couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. What had started as a minor inconvenience, a simple cold, had turned into a cultural exchange like no other. It was ridiculous, sure, but strangely fitting. After all, if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was turning chaos into connection.